Here we are in the West Organ Chamber, which for those of you who've been paying careful attention in past weeks, you remember this is the home of the choir division. And John and Taylor are busy doing voicing here today. And several of you have inquired exactly what is meant by the term voicing an organ. So they're going to try to give you a little bit of input about what indeed the word voicing means when it's applied to a pipe organ. To me, it's always been an extremely fascinating process, and I don't know near as much about it as they do. So you can see this array of tools spread out here, which always reminds me of that kind of tray that they bring out in the dentist's office that has a sterilized thing over it, and there's usually some pretty scary things in there. So this is that sort of a tray applied to pipe organs, and I'll turn it over to them at this point.
So, voicing an organ. Taylor and I have been at it here on site for, 4 weeks or so. Still have a few more to go. We've done a lot of voicing in the shop, many hours. So what does it mean to voice a pipe? Well, I'm going to try to keep it real simple. So a pipe is a whistle, a little bit like those whistles you used to play with as a kid, where you pull it out and it get lower and push it back in and get higher. Pipes come in assorted sizes. Here's a really small pipe. This is kind of a small to medium-sized pipe, and they get all the way up to 32 feet long, and they all have to be voiced. So there are different parts of a pipe that can be worked or tooled to make it sound louder or softer, to change the color, change the character, change how quick it speaks, those sorts of things. And we use these tools and many others to do that. A pipe speaks by air coming into the toe of the pipe, and then it goes up through the foot of the pipe, and then through an opening where it's kind of the whistle. We call that this whole area is the mouth of the pipe. And we use these tools to change all these various parts of the pipe. So the air coming in, we might make that hole bigger or smaller, and we'll use a tool like this. So you take and you put it in there and basically just push it in, and it makes it larger, allowing more air to go in. Or if you want to make the hole smaller, we use a tool like this, and that closes down the hole. So more air, less air. And then this is probably the most complicated part of the pipe, and there's a number of different things that you can do to make the pipe sound a certain way. And we use various tools to, we might use a knife like this to cut metal off of we'll call this the upper lip, and raise that up higher. So that can change the way the pipe sounds. We might use a tool like this to expand this opening here where the air comes through. Pull it out, push it in. You might do that. You might, depending on the pipe, you might use a hammer to tap it in. And then if you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but in the same area, there are little, we call nicks across there. And we use a tool like this, and this metal is soft, so you just take and basically shove that in, and you can change how many nicks you have. You can change how fine the nicks are, or medium nicks, or real heavy nicks. And all those things affect the way the pipe sounds or speaks, or in this whole process is known as voicing. So that's kind of a general idea of what is involved in voicing.
Could you talk about, just briefly, moving the languid around? I always think that's a
Okay.
mysterious process.
Right, so this piece of metal across here is called the languid, and depending on how high that is or how low that is, all these things affect the way the pipe speaks or is voiced. So one of the ways, if when listening to the pipe we decide, oh, the languid is too low, so we take a rod similar to this and pass it up through the toe, and we're pushing up on the languid carefully and raising it, and that affects how the pipe speaks or how it is voiced. And then if we decide that it needs to go down, we need to drive the languid down, we might use a tool like this, and that is set in there like that, and then you use a hammer, and the hammer hits and it drives the languid down. There are just so many things that can occur in this area that changes the voice of the pipe. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. It requires, as John has mentioned, there are many factors, and those factors both influence the sound of a pipe individually and how one thing relates to another. So often if you change one of those things, you end up having to change other parts as well. So it's a complicated balancing act, and it requires enormous skill and patience, because you have to do a lot of these things for hundreds, thousands of pipes. So it requires a special temperament, great set of ears, and mostly enormous patience and a willingness to stick with it over, even on days when you may have a headache and the sound of some of these shrill pipes over and over and over again is not really what you want to hear. That's what you have to accomplish. So it's a very special skill, and a skill that has been it's really at the heart of giving any pipe organ a voice, and it hasn't changed in centuries, which is, I think, one of the great things, this timeless quality of voicing organ pipes, that, if we brought a famous builder from the 1600s back to life all of a sudden, he would be able to relate to just what John was saying, because these factors have been part and parcel of how pipes sound ever since the ancient Greeks started playing around with this idea. So it's fascinating.
And I can add one other thing. So this organ has over 50 sets of pipes, and each set has a different sound to it. And our goal is we'll just say one set is called principal, 8-foot principal. We want and there are 61 pipes in the 8-foot principal set. So our goal is to try to make each pipe sound like the one next to it, and as loud and soft and shrill or dull, all these different color characteristics, and so we try to make that whole set sound the same from note to note, and that's part of the voicing process as well.
So the set has to be uniform from top to bottom, and it has to be able to balance and work with other sets of pipes in the way that you would want them to. So there's a huge number of variables that come into play when you're voicing an organ, and you have to keep going back and trying to make sure you have some perspective on the whole thing, which is hard to have when you are focusing on one pipe at a time, which is absolutely what you have to do. So to me, I just have no end of admiration for folks that do this kind of work, because it makes or breaks any pipe organ, yet it takes so much skill and so much stamina to really do a good job of it. So we hope that'll give you a little insight into the fascinating art of voicing a pipe organ.